Hello folks, this is Mike. Today I'm in my wife's sewing room and we're going to hang some under-counter lights. Now I've got a couple of simple, easy methods of doing this. Now one's a woodworker's method using a wood installation jig, which we'll make. The second is more of a layman's method using improvised materials and tools that most people have around their house. Either way, they're both effective and a piece of cake. So let's get started. Well, let me show you what we're going to install today. Now this is the Hyper Tough brand, which is I think a Walmart brand, and indeed we bought these off the shelf at Walmart. They come in a 24-inch and an 18-inch version. Now they're also linkable, which means you can connect a number of these in series under a cabinet. They're 1200 lumens, they're pretty bright, and it says they'll last 45 years, which means they'll outlast me. So before we go any further though, I want to just mention that the Walmart Corporation is not supporting us in any way, nor are they compensating us for trying to push their products. And we are certainly not doing that. Any number of these brands of lights will work in this situation, and 90% of those will probably work easily with the installation procedure we're going to show you. Now when you open up the box, this is what you get. Of course, you get the fixture and you get a couple of mounting screws. And then you get two electrical cords. Now the longer one is about 62 inches long, and it's your primary power cord, which plugs into your wall receptacle. And the other end plugs into the light. Also notice that there are power sockets on each end of the light because of the extendable feature. Now there's no switch on the light itself. There's an on-off switch built into the cord. Now the shorter cord is your power link. If you're running a string of lights under your cabinet, you only need to use one of the 60-inch power cords. That will plug into the wall and power your first light. Then you can use the power links to connect your other lights. That way, as you might expect, when you turn on the switch, all the lights will come on in unison. They'll all go off in unison. Now if these links look short, it's because they are. You can spread your lights out about 10 inches apart under your cabinet. Now if you need more space and you need to spread them out further, other manufacturers make lights with longer links. Matter of fact, there's a great deal of variety online when you go look at these lights. There's remote control lights, there's battery lights, touch sensitive lights, on and on. So it'd pay you to check that out. First we'll do the woodworking method, and we'll make a jig of scrap wood to position the mounting holes for the fixtures. But what if you don't have scrap wood or the tools to work it? Well, later in the video we will install a light just using a piece of cardboard. So please keep watching for that. I want to cut this piece to the exact length of my fixture, which is 24 inches. So I flush up one end and draw a line at the other. Now I'm going to cut this off on my miter saw. Now we'll measure for the position of our holes. Now notice that the mounting hole has a larger hole on one end with a slot on the other. So what we want to do is flush up the end of the fixture with the edge of the board. And what I'm doing is using a piece of square cut scrap. And I'm going to line that up on the very end of the slot portion. And I'm going to transfer that to the board. I'm going to do that on each end. Now I'm going to take my square and I'm going to line it up on that mark and extend a line across the board. And I'm going to write front on the business end of the board. And this is where we're going to make our measurements from. This just eliminates confusion. So now I measure the distance from the front of the light to the center of the slot. And I like to add about 1/8 of an inch, or maybe a millimeter or two if you're of the metric persuasion. And I do that because I'm mounting my fixture right at the front of the cabinet, right behind the lip. That extra 1/8 of an inch will give me a little bit of wiggle room, but I find it makes installing the fixture on the mounting screws a little bit easier. Now, if you plan to mount your fixture further away from the front, say maybe 3 inches, well, just add 3 inches to your square before you mark your jig. That will automatically lock that distance in. And then your jig would need to be 3 inches wider to compensate for that. Once we've made our little cross marks, we can drill these out using a bit slightly smaller than your mounting screws. We'll mount this jig under the cabinet and use it to drill out the mounting holes so they can't be oversized. My cabinets have a 1 5/8 inch overhang. So instead of fumbling with loose clamping shims, I'm going to cut a couple out of 2x4s and glue them to the jig. The combined thickness of the jig and the 2x4 will be deep enough for the clamping surface. We will let that dry for about an hour. Then we can remove the clamps and the jig's ready for use. And remember that you'll need a separate jig for each size of undercounter light that you use. Now I'm going to show you why I made my jig the same length as my fixture. Most all of my cabinets measure 31 inches wide. The inside distance from side to side is 29.5 inches. Now my fixture is 24 inches. That makes a difference of 5.5 inches. I'm going to divide that by 2 and I'll have 2 3/4 of an inch. Now all of this math has a purpose. I will cut a 2 3/4 inch positioning shim, then I can butt that against the cabinet side and simply snug my jig up to it. We'll clamp that into place, and now I can drill my mounting holes, but be sure not to drill all the way through the cabinet bottom. If you're worried about that, just use a drill stop to prevent it. Next, you can remove the clamps and the jig. Now you can start your mounting screws and drill them in. And be sure to leave a little space under the head so you can slide on the fixture. Now you can reinstall your wiring and go ahead and fit up your fixture. That was pretty quick and pretty simple, wasn't it? Now you may have a situation where it's impractical to use the shim. And in that case, I usually just do the math and draw a center line where I want my fixture to be. Then in this case, I just used a square cut piece of masonite. I extended the line across the cabinet bottom. Now if you don't have the appropriate squaring device, you can always use something like this, a book, a cardboard flap, or whatever you can find around your house that's machine square. Now I'm going to establish a center line on my jig itself, and then I'm going to match the lines up, clamp my jig in place, and we can go from there. In this case, my wife wanted the fixture centered directly over the sewing machine, which makes sense. So I simply eyeballed the positioning. Then I made a line at the end of the fixture, and then I can line my jig up with that line, clamp it in place, and I'm in business. Well, we're ready to hang our last light, and we're going to hang it in this spot right here. We're going to center it. And as promised, I'm going to show you how to do this using a cardboard flap for your jig. So let's go to the shop and I'll show you how to lay this out. Now remember that earlier in the video I said that we would be using materials that you probably had around your house for this jig. And indeed, we're going to use a cardboard box, a pencil, a yardstick or measuring tape, a straight edge, and a utility knife. The cardboard flaps on the box should be long enough to extend past the mounting holes on the fixture. Now one flap will be your square. I'm going to mark the factory cut corners and I'm going to label them as square so when we use it we won't use the wrong corner. And I'm going to write jig on the other flap, and now we can cut them free of the box. You'll notice that I put some blue tape here on my fixture, and I'm going to use my measuring stick, or yardstick rather, to find center, and I'm going to mark it. Now I'm going to position my jig piece on the fixture, and I'm going to just eyeball center it. And then I'm going to mark the center where my blue tape is, and then I'm going to mark the end of each slot, just like we did for the hardboard jig we made first. Now we mark the screw holes distance from the front, and I simply square the jig up with the front of the fixture, and now I'm going to make a mark on the far side of the slot, and this is to allow me that wiggle room like in the last example. And of course, we'll mark both ends. Now we'll use our square piece and we'll line it up on the marks we made at the bottom of the jig. And I'll tap both pieces together like so to square them up with each other. And then we'll extend those lines vertically up the board for a ways. Then we'll just use a straight edge. Now this is just a ruler, and we will line it up with our depth of marks and mark the intersect. Now this is the position of the screw holes. And finally, we will extend a line vertically across the jig for our center line. And now we can go ahead and use this to hang our light fixture. So the first step is to find the width of our space, and this recess is 35 inches wide. I'll divide by 2 and mark the center of the cabinet bottom. Now I'm using my hardboard square here, and I'm extending a line across the width of the space. Now you could just as easily use the cardboard square we just made. I just didn't think about it. I line up the jig center line to center line, hold it tightly, and drill the first mounting hole. Now I'm going to temporarily run in one of my screws through the cardboard jig. And this is just to keep it from slipping while I drill in the other hole. If you have trouble holding the jig steady, you could tape it in place until your holes are drilled. Just be sure to use a tape that will peel off easily. This is not a duct tape opportunity, trust me. So now I'll remove the jig and I can insert both of my mounting screws permanently. And as before, we'll leave a little space under the screw head. If you have trouble seating the fixture like I did here, you may have to back out the screws a turn or two. That's what I did wrong here. And now we can try again. Now to me, getting the fixture to slide on these little screws is the hardest part of the whole process. But now it's there. So let's try the light switch and look at that. Now that the fixtures are all installed, I'm going to pin up the dangling wires with some cable clamps. Now when this is done, the project is done. Well, I've got my lights installed, the wiring's pinned up, and I just have one thing left to do, and that's to try them out. So watch this. Wow, what a difference. I almost need sunglasses. And the camera's exposure meter has overcompensated and I've gone dark. So let me turn this off. There we go, now you can see me. Now remember folks that these lights are rated in lumens. These are 1200 lumens, which is why they're so bright. The higher the number, the brighter the light. So if you're anticipating maybe using like battery lights or something with much lower lumens, remember the results may be dim by comparison. Just a heads up. So I hope you can see from watching this video what a difference in the results just using these simple jigs and simple tools has made. I mean, we put these lights in first time right on the money. And we really cut down on the amount of time that we had to be bent over in an awkward position, almost upside down sometimes, trying to work under the cabinet. So guys, I've got more of these videos coming. I've got DIY, woodworking, and tool reviews, and there will be a list of those at the end of this video. So be sure to go below and like my video, subscribe to my channel, and ring that bell. And that way we can notify you when they're coming out. Also, questions and comments are appreciated. So be sure to do that, and I will answer you personally. So until next time, folks, thanks for watching.